Good morning. Good to be here. I'm here. It's spring break. It's a fantastic week. I am thankful to be here this morning. And I am normally in Westfield with my family. I work at a school called the Excel Center and work at a kind of a second chance diploma for adults. And since I work at a school, I apologize that I have to kind of get some participation today, but I'm used to that. And so I'm going to have you guys do an exercise that will help me out if you guys agree to it. But you should have gotten a kind of a note card on your way in. Does everyone have one? If you don't have one, just raise your hand and we'll get somebody to help you. But you're going to take your note card, and hopefully you have something to write with. It can be a pen or a pencil. It doesn't matter either way. But I want you to take your note card, and you're going to kind of do some introspection here and some self-grading, if you will. I want you to put a smiley face on that card if this applies to you. Don't write yet. But if this applies to you, if you're at the top 33% of your people at work in terms of work ethic. So when you look around you and you think, I work harder than 33%, or the rest of the bottom 2/3 of people, I'm at that top tier, 33% of people that work the hardest. I want you to put a smiley face. Now, if you don't have a job currently, if you're retired, or if you're a student in school, or if you're a homemaker, I want you to think about a time that you did have a job, or you can think back to school, it's fine as well. But did you work in that top 33%? I want you to put a smiley face if that's true for you, okay? I want you to put a face with a straight horizontal, I don't know what the word is, a smile that's straight, there you go. If you feel like you are right in the middle, like there's 50% of people that are like more slackers than you, and then there's 50% that are really a lot more into their work ethic than you are. And I want you to put a frowny face if you think you're at the bottom third. If you think, yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not really trying that hard at work. I would say 66% of the people are probably a lot more engaged than me. If that's you, you can be honest and put a frowny face. So get it? Smiley face if you're in the top 33% at your work or at some time that you worked. And then flat face if you're like right in the middle. And then frowny face if you're at the bottom 33%. Now what I want you to do is fold that paper. Fold it in half so that nobody can see what you put. This is private, confidential information here. Self-judgment. So you're going to fold this self-judgment in half so that nobody knows whose is whose. And now what I want you to do is I want you to trade it with somebody next to you. So you can go left, you can go right. Just trade it once, and then I want you to go behind you or in front of you. Trade again. The idea here is that you are not going to end up with your own paper. So you might have to reach behind, you might have to reach in front. Take a peek. If you got the same paper that you just wrote on, that is a mathematical miracle, and you should buy a lottery ticket today. But if you don't have your own, that's good. Now, what I want you to do is, now keep in mind, this is not your own. This isn't a reflection of you. This is some random Joe in the audience. I want you to stand up if you have a smiley face. Stand up if you have a smiley. Not do anything. Just stand up. Now, I'm not good at math, but I want you to ask yourself a question. Look around. Could we all be in the top 33%? And you can sit back down. Now, there are a lot of reasons we could touch on for this. I was curious how it would work in a church setting. I did it at a work conference setting, and it was a really very similar response. So why do we look around at work and have this feeling of like, they're lazy, but I'm awesome. She's a real suck-up, but I just do my work, and I'm proud of it. Why do we do that? Why do we have that bias towards ourselves? And this is the answer. There's a picture on the slide that tells us the answer. We tend to look at ourselves, even if we're a kitten, and we think, what a good-looking lion. We have very rosy glasses when it comes to our own behaviors and actions, but we tend to be really critical of other people's, right? And the reason that is we judge other people based on their actions. We judge ourselves based on our intentions. Makes sense, right? So a lot of us have this spirit about us where we walk around at work or at school or even at home as it relates to chores, and we think, I'm doing my share. What about those down there? Are they doing their share? And we're pretty critical, aren't we, of each other. There's another meme that I thought was funny that describes some friendships that we have. Actually, no, this is more of a marital one for me. I'm like talk to my wife, Kelly. I'm like, you're just so judgmental. And she's like, no, I'm very good at assessing what you're not getting done. And that's accurate, and I don't like it. But in college, it was this one. I was friends with Seth, and I felt like he was really judgmental. But the truth is, I just kept doing really dumb things that he was forced to be like, look, as your friend, you're an idiot. And so sometimes you feel this way in relationships. But again, there's this aura about us that puts us up here and everybody else down there. And we see this a lot in our social media, don't we? If you're on social media, you're aware that it's just a very volatile climate, isn't it? People say stuff. It's really easy to say stuff on Facebook. My wife and I like to feel better based on looking at people's Facebook posts. It's really easy to be like, wow, look at that political opinion combined with the Bible, that moron. And it doesn't matter, whichever way you want to spin it, however you want to feel, but it just makes you. And what's funny about that is we're judging them for putting something on Facebook. What are we doing? We're elevating ourselves by saying, we're not like that. We're the top 33% of Christians who behave this way, or however we want to define it. And then this also has a scary edge to it. Did you know that in our country, it'd be nice to believe that things are getting better in terms of divisiveness and people claiming that they're a part of hate groups? The truth is, we have had a 30% increase in the last 4 years of people that say they're actively involved in a hate group. A 30% increase. There's a map right here. It's probably hard to see, but it gives you a visual of where these hate groups are. And to me, this just blew my mind because it's like, wow, these are like real people that like have a meeting space, and they're like, we are neo-Nazis, and we meet here. And it's very fascinating to me, but that's because it's so easy to say, this is what is right, and I am a part of it, and you are on the outside. This also, I fell into the same trap with this, because I looked at, if you see the very bottom one on the list, some of them are very specific. It's like white nationalist, Christian identity, which is very unfortunate, neo-Confederate, black separatist, and at the very bottom it just says general hate. And to me, I'm like, that's kind of lazy. You just hate everything. It's like, come on, at least pick something that you feel passionate about. But what maybe you did what I did. When I looked at this, it was kind of like, I'm not in a hate group. I feel pretty good about myself. That's a low bar, but hey, it makes me feel better. I'm taking up my cross today. I'm not joining a hate group. So we do this regardless of our behavior and our opinion. We tend to always put ourselves up here, and we put everybody else down there. Now we're looking at a story today that's a very familiar story, and it's the prodigal son. But the context I want us to focus on is a very different context than maybe what we typically look at in this story. And the reason Jesus even tells the story of the prodigal son is because the Pharisees are grumbling about something. And Pharisees, if you don't know that term, it's a term that was used for religious leaders in the day. They were Jewish leaders who were they had very high opinions of themselves, and culture in general was basically in agreement that these were the people that knew God's laws, knew how to communicate those laws, and they were living right, like they were doing it right. So listen to them. Jesus is interacting with people that are not like that. And so I want you to look, if you want to turn in your Bible, you can, if you brought yours with you. If not, it's on the screen, so you can just look up here with me. But in Luke 15, chapter 15, verse 1, Jesus gives the reason about why he's telling the story of the prodigal son. And it says, now the tax collectors and sinners, they were drawing near to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. Now, this wasn't a direct statement to Jesus. This was kind of like, they were like tweeting this, like, wow, this guy, he isn't going to get a following by hanging out with those people. And what were they doing? The Pharisees were looking at these people and putting them into a camp. They're tax collectors and prostitutes. These are not people of high esteem. These are people that they're thinking in terms of, hey, Jesus, if you want to build like a movement that's going to go somewhere, that's going to raise a big ruckus in Rome and raise Judaism to the top, you need to be hanging out with the movers and the shakers. You need to be hanging out with us, the top 33%. Why are you hanging out with the bottom 33%? This doesn't really make any sense. And so they're talking about this amongst themselves, but Jesus, being aware, because he's God, knows their thoughts, knows what they're thinking. And he tells a series of stories. And the first story he tells is about a sheep. And the next story he tells is about a coin. And what's he doing? He's explaining how God feels about things that are lost. He's addressing the Pharisees by saying, you guys think it's silly for me to spend time with these people, but this is who God is passionate about. God wants to be around these people. God wants to help people who need help. And then he lands the plane with the the longest story for sure, powerful in different ways because we can relate to it because it's a family story. And he tells the story of the prodigal son. And so we pick up, after we have the reason why Jesus is telling this story, let's jump right into the story itself. So in verse 11 of chapter 15, so Jesus goes into this story. He says, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into the far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. Now, the first thing to note here is the severity of this interaction between father and son. This is very different than in our culture if we thought like a son was just like fed up with his dad and was like, whatever, I'm out of here. Give me some money for college. This was like a major slap in the face for the son to look at his dad and say, you're dead to me. I'm done with this family. I want whatever money you would give me when you die. I want that now because I'm just going to leave. So you can imagine your son saying this to you. This is not a good moment as a parent. This is a tragic moment. But the father, brokenhearted as he would be, agrees to this and lets the son leave and gives him his inheritance. So let's see what the son does. We pick up in, I believe, verse 14. Where are we? 15. So he went and hired himself to one of the citizens of the country. And this is what happened after he squandered all of his wealth. The son goes away, the father gives him his property, and it says, not many days later, the younger son had gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. So what did he do? He did what we would expect. A son who has a bunch of money, who goes off with no responsibility, he spends it on partying, he spends it on women, he just wastes all his money. And it gets to a point where he runs out of money. And then it says, when he had spent everything, a severe famine rose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So this is a very desperate situation that the son is in. He went from having a bunch of money and having nice parties and lots of friends around to now he's unemployed, he has no way to provide for himself, and he gets a job working with pigs, which in Jewish culture was like the ultimate rock bottom. So there's no reason for him to be thankful in this situation. Pigs, you weren't even allowed to be near them in Jewish culture, let alone work with them, and let alone desire to eat what they had. So you can tell that he is truly at the lowest of all low points. And keep in mind, this is before Charlotte's Web was written, so there is no story going to come out of this about a nice spider spinning a web. He's in a bad spot. And so what's he do? In verse 17, it says, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Now I want to pause here in the story, because whenever I used to read this story, I used to think, well, that's humility right there. He's got humility. He has this sense of like, I need to change things. This is good. He's learning. But I don't think what he has is humility here. What he has is bad circumstances. You know the difference? There's a difference between I really want to change and oh my gosh, I am starving. What he wants is to go back to his father, but he wants to throw himself at his father as a what? A servant. So he's basically saying, hey, Dad, I know I screwed up. I really put myself in the bottom 33%. I didn't do so hot, but hey, here's the deal. Here's the thing. I'm going to make it right. I'll work for you. I'll be one of your servants. So what's he trying to do? It sounds like humility, but what is he really wrestling with? Still, pride. He says, I've made a mistake, but here's the thing. I've sinned, I've messed up, but I'm going to work for you. I'm going to make this right. Now that's fascinating to me because I had never really thought about it in that light. And so what's going to happen? There's this moment where we don't know for sure how his father is going to respond to this. And in verse 20, it says that he's got his speech ready, he's got his plan, and now he's going to go and return to his father. So it says he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to the father, he's getting ready to go into his speech. He's going to outlay his plan. He's going to talk about how he's going to get back in the 33% of good workers. He's going to earn his keep. So he's going in to start his speech, and he says to his father, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." What happens? He doesn't get to finish his speech. His dad interrupts him. But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put the ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate." So he doesn't even let his son get into his speech about how he's going to make things right. The father is just ecstatic about his son returning home. Again, remember the last interaction they had. His son was basically saying, "You're dead to me." There's a hand gesture for that, but I'm not going to do it. There's a lot that was said between him and his father in the last interaction they had. And you can expect that when the father sees his son from far off, there might be a different response. Now, we're used to this because if we're familiar with the story, if you've heard this before, either because you grew up in church or just because it's a really popular story, you already know the ending. It's not a surprise. Of course, the dad's going to take him back in. It's going to be great. He's going to show him grace. But if you're in this moment hearing the story for the first time, how do you think the father's going to respond? If that child has literally said, "Forget you, I'm out, you're dead to me," how do you respond when you see that child again? Isn't some discipline in order? I would think that might be step one. And I know the Pharisees would think that way because they're listening to this story and they're thinking to themselves, how should the father deal with the son? What's the consequence here? There's clear rules that have been broken. What should the consequence be? And they might quote Deuteronomy and they might say, this child should be stoned. There's a verse in Deuteronomy that talks about how if a child has done something that's a rebellion so egregious that the community deems that punishment worth death, then stoning is in order. And the Pharisees might have been tempted to play that card and say, we've got to set an example here. We can't have children just running off and saying, forget their parents, let me have all your money. We can't let that become a common pattern. There needs to be justice. And I know some of you are with me. I have children. There are times I've been tempted to threaten them with Deuteronomy and say, a stoning is in order because of the way that you have treated me or the way you've spoken or the way you have not cleaned your room. And there is a bit of Pharisaical truth to the fact that there needs to be a consequence here. What's going on? How's the dad going to respond? And yet the dad does not respond in any sort of way. The dad responds with complete and utter excitement to know that his son is home, to know that his son is back, to know that his son is alive. He does not do what we think he might do, and what the son's idea even is. The son's idea is, hey, let me work for you. And God the Father in this story does not say, here are your W-2s, here's your work application, you can live with the servants. And after you prove yourself, maybe I'll call you child again. But for now, you're my employee. No. God does not respond this way. And it's fascinating. It's amazing. Grace does not wait for his son to change. It meets him right where he is. And it's interesting to think through, what if the son had refused? What if the son had said, that's a nice offer, but I can't accept that. I need to earn my keep. I need to work my way back into your grace. Well, we get to know what that would look like because the story's not over yet. How is the older brother going to respond? We know how the younger brother's going to respond. Now let's see what the older brother does. In verse 25, now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So the son is unaware of the party that's going on because where is the older son? He's working. He's doing what you do when you're in the top 33%. You're not partying. You're out in the field. You're working. So he didn't know what's happening. And he calls one of the servants and he asks him what these things meant. And he says to him, your brother has come and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. What's going on here? The brother is responding with anger. Why? Well, the brother has a right to, doesn't he? The brother can look at the dad and say, I have never done anything like this son has done. This is insane. I've worked here every day. And that's similar to what he does say. So his dad approaches him, and this is what the older son says to his father. Look, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Two really good arguments. Not only has he not broken any of the laws he's not supposed to break, but he's also been really productive. He's been in the top 33%. And he says, yet you have never given me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, notice the difference? Does he say, my brother? No. Remember, he's dead to him. He's dead to me. He's not my brother. He's your son. He's your son. He's down there. When this son of yours came, who devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. Dad, this isn't right. There needs to be justice. I'm out here working my butt off, and I get nothing. And this son has taken everything and completely wasted it on prostitutes. And this is the way that you're going to respond. You can sense the resentment in his tone. You can hear the anger. And you can understand, perhaps, why he feels that way. I used to think this story was about two different types of brother. But as I read it this time, I realized that they're two different brothers, but they have the same problem. One brother says, I've really messed up, but let me work to make it right. It's pride. The other brother says, I've never messed up. I've always worked hard. You owe me. Both brothers are wrong, but which is the one that's going to go to the party? Both of them have a moment where they can either look grace in the eye and turn it down, or they can accept it. And who accepts it? The brother who knows he needs grace. The brother who hasn't spent his whole life building a resume of, here's all the things I've done. I grew up in church. I grew up saying the prayers. I know Bible verses. I haven't broken the 10 Commandments. I've been productive for you. We've seen a harvest every year. I've been working hard. I've contributed to the family's bottom line. I have leadership. I have respect. And he is not going to the party. Why is he not going to the party? Because his dad didn't invite him to the party? Nope. Because he's keeping himself out. So I want you to think for a moment about which brother you might be in the story. Because I think we can see ourselves in both brothers, if we're honest. Which brother do you feel like you associate with? Do you associate with the older brother, or do you associate with the younger brother? For me, let's start with the older brother. There are people in our lives, let's be honest, that we look at them and they're like our younger brother. They're the person that we're mad about. They're the person that can't get their life together. They're the person that wastes money. They're the person that makes the same mistake over and over. They're the person that has decided they don't believe in any of this Bible stuff, and they're going to go their own way. That's the younger brother in your story, okay? How do you respond to that person? For me, it is a weird illustration, but my father, that's what I thought of this morning. My father is the younger brother in the story. Because when I was 4 years old, my parents split, and he went off, and instead of going into full-time ministry, which was his plan, he decided he didn't believe any of this, and he went a different direction. So I grew up most of my childhood looking at my father as though he was the prodigal son, as though he was the one who ran away. And as a young child, I perceived that perhaps it was my job to fix that in some way, or to be extra good, or to carry the torch where he dropped it. And so I grew up thinking, my dad's Darth Vader, but I get to be... Wow, that was the most... Wow. That says something, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing what just happened. And so I grew up with this feeling of, I'm going to be Luke, I'm going to bring balance to the Force, I'm going to do ministry, I'm going to do all these wonderful things for God, I'm going to carry the torch where my father dropped it. Well, those things all looked good and sounded good in the church community. But the truth is, I was guilty of quite the same resentments that the older brother has in this story. And as I grew up, I did a lot of the right things, and I had this right image that I was portraying to the community, but inside, it was way more about my performance and about me being at the top 33% than it was about my true relationship with God. And I found something fascinating recently that was written by Friedrich Nietzsche, who is a true, in my opinion, I looked at him as a younger brother. He's the guy that said God is dead. And I've always heard him used in church as somebody that, oh, what a bad philosopher. I read something recently that said that was just a piece of what he was saying, that he was saying God is dead because the church has killed him. That we have divorced a relationship with Christ from I follow Christ, I love Christ, to I know about Jesus in the Bible, and these are the things I believe. And Nietzsche said something interesting about people that were Christians that he did not like. He said there are 4 resentments that Christians carry with them, and he said it just made his skin crawl when he could see them or when he could sense them. He said the first resentment that religious people have is a resentment at God for demanding sacrifice. They're mad at God for demanding this high level of living, which is exactly like the older brother, right? What did he say? I've been working for you my whole life. I've given you everything. I give you all my time. You're in here partying, and I'm out here in the field. I've never broken any laws. That looks like obedience, but what's the heart of that? It's resentment at having to live up to this ridiculous set of rules. And so there's resentment at God. There's resentment this way. And there's anger that comes from that. And I felt that as a kid growing up. I was really thankful that I knew what the laws were, but I was really mad all the time because I couldn't stop breaking them. And I was mad at myself, and I was mad at God. Statement number 2, he said, they have resentment towards others for not appreciating our sacrifice. So we resent other people when they don't appreciate the sacrifice that we are living for the sake of God. Isn't that fascinating? We're putting ourselves where? Up here. And all the other fake ones down there, they don't really believe like me. They don't really serve like me. So towards others for not appreciating our sacrifice. Number 3, he said, they are resentful for having to sacrifice as much as they sacrifice. Basically, reality just stinks. They're not happy because they think that their sacrifice is going to get them something. Sound familiar? Sounds familiar to me. I thought my sacrifice, my commitment to ministry, was going to give me success and going to give me a job and pay me. But most importantly, I just wanted people to say, oh, good job, good talk. I really just wanted my sacrifice to earn me a result, just like the older brother. He was mad that his sacrifices had not, you don't give me a goat? I haven't worked enough for a goat? You give him a heifer? Come on. He's mad at reality because it's not living up to the formal business plans that he has outlined in his head. And then number 4, resentment towards others for not having to do it. You're resentful at other people because they don't have to do the things that you have to do. And you resent other people. And clearly the older brother was full of resentment towards his older brother and at his father. Clearly I was full of resentment as I was growing up, but I didn't know it. I wasn't aware of it. I was full of resentment that I could try and be good and yet not get fixed. I said, God, why am I not getting fixed? Why am I still struggling with the same sins? Or why am I not experiencing the career that I want to have? Or why am I not experiencing whatever accolades I need to feel good about myself? And the truth is, oftentimes we do not know how to accept the grace that we need until we're honest about the resentments that are in us. And for me, resentments turned into a major problem. They say that most addictions are born out of resentment. That's really the main thing that they come from. It's internal resentments that you don't really heal and touch in the right ways, and they expose themselves in behavior that you can't control, whether that's gambling or drugs or alcohol, and in my case, pornography. I had an addiction to pornography since the first time that I saw it when I was in 8th grade. It just gripped me. And I didn't understand all the resentment. I just knew this is something that I love to look at and love to do. And that underlying resentment grew with me until the point where eventually when I was working with Youth for Christ, my addiction cost me my job. I was to the point in my addiction where I was able to lust after the people that I was claiming to serve. I was able to have a child, and I thought that would fix me. But I could look at pornography in one hand and hold my newborn daughter in the other hand, and I just kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why is God not fixing this? Why is God not curing me? Why is he not taking care of this? And so I joined recovery groups, and I went to different places and tried to get help. But even the way that I approached that was much like the younger brother. It was like, okay, I'm at rock bottom, but watch this. I'm going to work my way out. I'm going to work the 12 steps. Perfect. 12 steps. Let me work them. And so I would just fix myself. I would say, God, yeah, it's bad, but watch this. I'm going to get myself back up to that top 33%, and you're going to use this. And I wondered why I wasn't getting any better. Well, the truth was my performance was more important than my relationship with God. And that's super sad. But that's the way it was. And that's how it was for the older brother. Did he care about intimacy with his father? Is that what he was mad about? You don't spend time with me? No. It was, I'm not getting a goat when I've worked so hard. What's he focused on? He's focused on his performance. Why haven't you done look at my performance, look what I'm doing. And that's how I tried to approach recovery. It's super, super sad to God when our relationship with him is second fiddle to our performance to him. There's a reason that Oswald Chambers, which was a fantastic writer, has written some amazing things. He said, the greatest enemy of devotion to Christ is our service to him. The greatest enemy of our devotion to Christ is our service to him. And that resonated with me. Because if you just keep thinking that all this work is going to put you in a place where finally you're there and God is happy with you, you're living wrong. You're not accepting grace. And I'll close with this story. I walked into a group not too long ago where I was tempted to do the same thing with this man that we did today. I was tempted to look at him. He dealt with some issues that were related to sexuality, but he just had a different struggle, and his struggle had things with minors, and it had things that he had done jail time for, and it had things that he was serving, and there were federal offenses, and there was probation and house arrest, and real big consequences. And there was a temptation for me to kind of look at him and say, glad I'm not that guy. Glad I don't have a record. Glad I haven't done something with a minor. And there was a temptation for me to put myself there. And what happens if I'm up there? You better believe I'm not going to be able to accept the grace that I need. And there was one particular day where I came in to a meeting, and I was in a small group with this gentleman. And I was in a terrible place. I was in a place where I had made another mistake, in fact, that very morning. I had relapsed, and I went to group thinking, I'll just sit out here and wait till the meeting's over. I'm not even going to go in. How can I go into a meeting and say, I'm recovering, when the truth is I don't even want to recover. I don't even want to get better. But I walked into that meeting, and I said those things out loud to him, and it was so evident how much self-loathing I had and how much animosity I felt towards myself because I was back in that place. Let me fix it. I'll get clean for like 30 days. My brain will change. After 90 days, I'll be a totally different person. And in a year, I'll be writing books. That was what I was planning. And he looked at me in this moment where I couldn't even look at myself, where I was just saying, I just hate myself. And I'm never going to get this right. And I shouldn't even be in this room today. And I was starting to get emotional. And he looked at me, and he was crying. And he was able to look at me and say, I've been there. And instead of grabbing me and shaking me or grabbing me and saying, get it together, you've been in this for 4 years, why haven't you recovered yet? He looked at me and he didn't have to say anything, he just had tears. And he knew what it was like. He knew what it was like to be at the bottom. He knew what it was like to beat yourself up. He knew what it was like to feel like there was no hope. But you know what else he knew? He knew something better than all of that. All the comparisons, all the plans, all the working. He knew God's grace. For real. Like, really know it. He knows it. Like, when he talks about God, he is the happiest person that I've ever talked to. And he's lost a lot. He's really hit rock bottom. He works at a call center, and he loves his job, and he's happy. He's thankful for the opportunities. He's so thankful today that his probation is ending. He's thankful for the possibilities that are still there in life. But most of all, he's thankful for grace because that's the best thing that's ever happened to any of us. It's the best thing. And as long as I keep thinking my performance is the best thing, and my resume is the best thing, and being in the top 33% is the best thing, I'm not going to taste what my friend has tasted, and that's grace. So I hope that this season, as we lead up to Easter, that it is not going to be our discipline and what we give up and what we sacrifice that is going to help us in our relationship with God. I hope it's the acceptance of grace and the ability to stop looking around and comparing ourselves to others, but to truly accept what God has given us and freely offer. Let's pray. God, we are so thankful for your word. We're thankful for the stories that Jesus told and the way that we understand your heart. We thank you that we do not have to enter into this insane repeating of trying to make ourselves better. That's not the gospel. It is not just keep working harder, keep trying more. It's not just get up and start over again. It's you meet us where we are, you give us grace. Your son came to pay the price that we could not pay. We're so thankful for your sacrifice and for the relationship that we can have with you, not because we've earned it, but because we can accept that we need grace. And thank you for your word and for this day. In Jesus' name, amen.